I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm Kate. I'm an Australian pharmacist with more than 25 years of experience working across hospital pharmacy, community pharmacy, palliative care, aged care, and now voluntary assisted dying. Welcome to Pop Pod, the clinician edition of Prescribe or Pass. Look for me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Prescribe or Pass. Every episode explores one medicine, one condition, or one clinical concept, explaining not just what we do, but why we do it. Whether you're a pharmacy student, pharmacist, or any clinician who works with medicines, welcome to the Pop Pod. This is episode 4 in our 8-part series on ADHD medicines. In the previous episode, we looked at methylphenidate itself, how it works, what patients may notice when it starts working, common adverse effects, and the monitoring that should happen during treatment. Today, we are going one layer deeper because knowing the active ingredient is not enough. Ritalin 10, Ritalin LA, and Concerta all contain methylphenidate, but they do not release it into the body in the same way. And that means they may differ in how quickly the effects begin, when the strongest effects occur, how long the medicine lasts, how smoothly or unevenly the effect is experienced, how it should be swallowed or administered, and whether another brand can be supplied in its place. By the end of this episode, you should be able to explain the practical differences between immediate-release methylphenidate, Ritalin LA, and Concerta, describe the release pattern of each formulation, recognize why the same number of milligrams does not necessarily produce the same clinical experience, counsel patients correctly about swallowing, food, missed doses, and tablet remnants, and identify which Australian methylphenidate brands are considered substitutable on the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. This episode is particularly relevant for pharmacists and pharmacy students because this is an area where a seemingly simple brand substitution can create a surprisingly complicated conversation. The same active ingredient does not mean the same medicine experience. So let's begin with the central idea that all 3 products contain methylphenidate hydrochloride. But the formulation determines how that methylphenidate arrives in the bloodstream. Imagine 3 people are delivering the same amount of water. One tips it out immediately, one delivers half now and half later, and one turns on a carefully controlled irrigation system that releases water gradually across most of the day. The substance is the same. The delivery pattern is not. And with methylphenidate, that delivery pattern can influence both effectiveness and tolerability. So a patient may say, Ritalin worked, but Concerta didn't, or Concerta was much smoother, or I changed to a generic and it felt completely different. Those reports should not automatically be dismissed, but nor do they automatically prove that one brand contains a better or stronger version of methylphenidate. The differences in release profile, expectations, routine, food intake, dose equivalence, adherence, or the timing of the person's daily demands make a difference. Our job is to understand the formulation before deciding what the patient's experience means. Let's start with immediate release methylphenidate. The original brand is Ritalin 10, although other immediate release brands are available in Australia. The tablet releases methylphenidate relatively quickly after it's swallowed. Plasma concentrations generally rise quickly, with the Australian product information reporting an average peak at around 2 hours. The plasma half-life is only around 2 to 3 hours. Clinically, people often describe an effect lasting somewhere around 3 to 4 hours, although this varies considerably. That short duration can be useful. It allows prescribers to target particular periods of the day, for example, school hours or a university lecture, driving, paperwork, or an evening task. It also makes immediate release methylphenidate useful during titration. A clinician can adjust the dose and timing in relatively small steps and observe the result without committing the patient to an all-day formulation. But the flexibility comes with disadvantages. The person may need 2 or 3 doses during the day. That creates more opportunities to forget a dose, For children, it may mean medication needs to be stored and administered at school. For adults, it can mean remembering a lunchtime dose in the middle of a chaotic working day, which, somewhat inconveniently, may be exactly the sort of task their ADHD makes difficult. And the rise and fall may also be more noticeable. Some people experience a clear point when the medication begins working and another clear point when it wears off. That does not necessarily mean the medication has caused their ADHD to become worse. Sometimes it is simply the contrast between functioning with medication and functioning without it. But some people do experience irritability, fatigue, hunger, emotional sensitivity, or a temporary increase in symptoms as the dose wears off. And people call this a crash or rebound, although those terms are used quite loosely. Counselling immediate release methylphenidate. The most important counselling point is timing. The patient should understand what time each dose is intended to be taken, what part of the day each dose is intended to cover, and how late dosing could affect sleep. The Ritalin product information also recommends standardizing administration in regards to food because food can alter methylphenidate exposure. And that doesn't mean every patient must take it with food, it just means consistency matters. If someone takes it before breakfast on weekdays but after a large breakfast on weekends, the onset might not feel identical. Immediate release tablets should also be stored securely. Methylphenidate is a Schedule 8 medicine and patients should not share doses or keep loose tablets around where others can easily access them. Ritalin LA. Ritalin LA is a modified release capsule. The LA stands for long-acting. But it is important not to interpret long-acting as meaning that the medicine is released slowly and evenly from morning until night. Ritalin LA uses beads inside the capsule to create 2 releases. Broadly speaking, one portion behaves like an immediate release dose, the remaining portion is delayed and releases later. This produces what the product information calls a bimodal plasma concentration profile, 2 distinct peaks approximately 4 hours apart. A useful way to explain it is that Ritalin LA behaves somewhat like 2 doses of immediate release methylphenidate, with the second dose built into the capsule. For example, Ritalin LA 20 milligrams is designed to approximate the overall exposure produced by 10 milligrams of immediate release methylphenidate taken in the morning and another 10 milligrams approximately 4 hours later. That does not mean every patient will experience the 2 regimens as perfectly identical, but it helps explain the design. The first release begins the effect in the morning, and the second release extends it into the afternoon. The product information states that the relative bioavailability of one daily Ritalin LA dose is comparable to the same total daily dose of immediate release methylphenidate given in 2 doses. For many people, this provides approximately 6 to 8 hours of useful coverage, although duration varies. That may cover a school day or the central part of a working day, but it may not cover early mornings, evening study, parenting, driving home, household administration, or social activities. This is why long-acting is not a promise that one capsule will cover every waking hour. Ritalin LA is taken once daily in the morning. The capsule may be swallowed whole. For someone who cannot swallow the capsule, the Australian product information permits the capsule to be opened and the contents sprinkled onto applesauce. The beads must not be crushed, chewed, or divided because damaging them can alter the modified release system. And this is where the language matters. Opening the capsule is not the same as crushing the contents. The capsule shell is simply a container. The individual beads are the delivery system. The full contents should be taken immediately rather than saved as an approximate half dose for later. Ritalin LA may be taken with or without food, but the consumer information recommends taking it consistently in the same way each day. Again, consistency can make the effect more predictable. Concerta. Concerta is also a modified release methylphenidate, but it does not behave like Ritalin LA. Concerta is a tablet designed to provide an initial release followed by a progressively controlled delivery of methylphenidate across the day. The original Concerta tablet uses an osmotic delivery system, commonly referred to as OROS. The outside of the tablet contains an immediate release coating. That coating dissolves after the tablet is swallowed and provides the initial methylphenidate dose. Then fluid enters the tablet through a semi-permeable membrane. As pressure builds inside, methylphenidate is pushed through a tiny opening in the tablet, and the result is not two separate doses in the same way as Ritalin LA. Instead, Concerta aims to provide an initial rise followed by sustained delivery over approximately 12 hours. The Australian Consumer Information describes the outer layer as providing the initial dose with a special shell releasing the remainder slowly throughout the day. This can produce a smoother and longer period of coverage for some patients, but designed to last approximately 12 hours does not mean every person will receive exactly 12 hours of noticeable benefit. Some people metabolize methylphenidate more quickly. Others find that the final hours are too weak to be useful. And a person's required duration depends on what they are trying to achieve. A child may need coverage until the end of school. An adult may need to function through work, the commute home, dinner, parenting, and evening administration tasks. The same medicine duration can therefore be adequate for one person and inadequate for another. Concerta must be swallowed whole. The tablets must not be crushed, chewed, or broken. Doing so destroys the release system. Unlike Ritalin LA, Concerta cannot be opened and sprinkled onto food. It should be swallowed whole with liquid and may be taken with or without food. This makes it unsuitable for someone who cannot reliably swallow the tablet. There is another counselling point that can prevent considerable alarm. The Concerta shell does not completely dissolve. After the methylphenidate has been released, the empty shell may appear in the person's stool. This is sometimes called a ghost tablet. It does not mean the medicine has passed straight through without being absorbed. It's the empty delivery shell and its appearance is expected. And this is exactly the sort of counselling point that takes 10 seconds in the pharmacy and may prevent a distressed phone call the following morning. So let us place the three formulations side by side. Immediate release methylphenidate produces one relatively rapid rise and fall. Ritalin LA produces two release phases, resulting in two peaks approximately 4 hours apart. Concerta provides an initial dose followed by prolonged controlled delivery intended to last approximately 12 hours. That means Ritalin LA and Concerta are not simply short and long versions of the same release pattern. They are different delivery systems. A patient who responds well to the two-peak pattern of Ritalin LA may not experience Concerta in the same way. Someone who feels peaks and troughs on Ritalin LA may prefer the longer, smoother profile of Concerta. Someone else may find Concerta too slow in the morning or too persistent in the evening. There is no universally superior formulation. The better formulation is the one whose release pattern best matches the person's clinical response, daily schedule, and adverse effects. Which brings us to one of the most important points in the episode. The milligram number cannot be compared in isolation. 10 milligrams of immediate release methylphenidate is not interchangeable with a 10 milligram modified release capsule simply because they both say 10 milligrams. And Ritalin LA 20 milligrams is not the same formulation as Concerta 18 milligrams or any other Concerta strength. When switching from immediate release Ritalin to Ritalin LA, the product information recommends selecting the Ritalin LA dose equal to the person's total daily immediate release dose within the relevant maximum dose limits. For example, a person taking 10 milligrams in the morning and 10 milligrams at lunchtime may be switched by their prescriber to Ritalin LA 20 milligrams each morning. But even when the total number of milligrams is the same, the timing of the exposure changes. The person may notice a different onset, different afternoon coverage, or different appetite and sleep effects. Switching to Concerta requires a formulation-specific conversation and clinical judgment. It should not be improvised at the dispensing counter. The prescriber needs to consider the previous regimen, the required duration, response, adverse effects, and available tablet strengths. Once switched, the patient should be reviewed rather than being told that it is the same medicine, so it should feel the same. And what about generics? And this is where the Australian pharmacy practice becomes particularly important. As of July 2026, the PBS lists several brands within each methylphenidate formulation group. For immediate release methylphenidate 10 milligram tablets, the listed brands include Ritalin 10, Artige, ARTIGE, and Rinidate. For the Ritalin LA modified release capsules, listed brands include Ritalin LA, Rubifen LA, and Atora LA. And for the prolonged release tablet group that includes Concerta, PBS listed brands include Concerta, methylphenidate Tiva XR, methylphenidate Sandoz XR, and methylphenidate XR ARX. The PBS places an A brand equivalence indicator next to brands it considers substitutable within the relevant item. That means, from a PBS substitution perspective, brands within the same list can generally be substituted unless the prescriber has indicated that brand substitution is not permitted. There are several important qualifications. First, substitution occurs within the formulation group. Ritalin LA is not substituted with Concerta. Second, the same strength must be applied. Third, state and territory S8 requirements, prescription wording, and any brand substitution restrictions must still be followed. Fourth, equivalent dosing does not mean visually identical. The tablet or capsule may have a different colour, size, imprint, container, or excipients. Patients deserve to be told when the appearance changes. And finally, bioequivalence does not guarantee that every individual will report an identical subjective experience. Some people should be able to use an approved substitutable brand without clinically important loss of effect. However, if a patient reports a consistent and reproducible change after substitution, that deserves investigation rather than ridicule. Check whether the medicine supplied was genuinely the same formulation and strength, whether the directions remained the same, whether it was taken with food in the same way, whether doses were missed, whether sleep, stress, caffeine, or other medicines changed, whether the expected duration differs from the actual duration, and whether the symptoms recur consistently when the brand is changed. The answer should not automatically be, generics are bad, but it should not automatically be, you imagined it. The brand myths. There are two opposing myths here. The first is, all methylphenidate is exactly the same. That is false. The active ingredient may be the same, but immediate release tablets, dual release capsules, and prolonged release osmotic tablets have distinctly different delivery patterns. The second myth is generic methylphenidate is just a cheap copy and cannot be trusted. This is also misleading. Australian generic medicines must satisfy regulatory standards, and PBS-listed A-flagged brands are considered brand equivalent for substitution within that PBS item. But the generic must be matched to the correct formulation group. Pharmacists need to look at the dose form, the strength, the brand equivalence group, the prescribed directions, and the intended release profile. Here's a practical dispensing conversation. Imagine a patient presents with a prescription for Concerta 36 milligrams. The pharmacy has an available, substitutable, prolonged-release methylphenidate brand. So the conversation might sound like this. This contains the same active ingredient and strength and is a listed substitutable brand for your prescribed product. The tablet may look different, but it is still a prolonged-release tablet intended to provide all-day coverage. Have you used this brand before? That gives the patient information without implying that the product is inferior. It also opens the door for them to mention a previous difficulty. Now, imagine the pharmacy has Ritalin LA 40 milligrams, but not Concerta 36 milligrams, and those are not substitutes. So even though they are both long-acting methylphenidate products, the strengths, dose, forms, and release profiles are different. The patient needs the prescribed formulation or prescriber involvement. Key counselling summary. For immediate release methylphenidate, clarify the exact dosing times. Relate each dose to the period it is intended to cover. Keep administration in relation to food reasonably consistent. Discuss late dosing and sleep. And explain what the patient should do if a dose is missed. For Ritalin LA, take it once in the morning, swallow the capsule whole, or where appropriate, open it and sprinkle the complete contents onto applesauce. Do not crush or chew the beads. Do not divide the contents to create an approximate lower dose, and take it consistently with or without food. For Concerta and its substitutable prolonged-release tablet brands, take it in the morning, swallow whole. Do not crush, chew, or break it. Explain that it is intended to last approximately 12 hours and warn that the empty tablet shell may appear in stool. For every formulation, confirm the intended duration. Ask when the medicine begins working and when it seems to wear off. Check appetite and sleep. Check any brand change. Reinforce secure S8 storage. And never assume that the patient understands the difference simply because they have taken methylphenidate before. The final takeaway. Ritalin LA and Concerta contain the same active drug, but they are not 3 interchangeable names for the same product. Immediate release methylphenidate gives 1 relatively short period of exposure. Ritalin LA gives 2 planned releases, and Concerta provides an initial release followed by prolonged controlled delivery. The formulation changes the shape and the dose across the day, and that shape can determine whether the medicine fits the patient's life. For pharmacists, the key question is not, what's the active ingredient? The key question is, how is this particular product designed to deliver that active ingredient? And is the product that I am supplying genuinely equivalent to the one that was prescribed? Some reflective questions. When dispensing methylphenidate, do you routinely check the formulation and release pattern, or do you focus mainly on the active ingredient and strength? How would you explain to a patient why Ritalin LA and Concerta cannot be directly substituted even though they both contain long-acting methylphenidate? What questions could you ask a patient who reports that a generic brand does not work the same before concluding that the problem is, or is not, the brand? How could your pharmacy make brand changes more visible to patients, particularly when the colour, shape, or packaging of the S8 medicine changes? Are the pharmacists and the dispensary staff in your workplace familiar with the current PBS equivalence groups for immediate release Ritalin LA style and Concerta style methylphenidate products? Suggested CPD record wording. I reviewed the differences between immediate release and modified release methylphenidate formulations, including Ritalin LA, and Concerta. I considered their release profiles, duration, administration requirements, switching principles, counselling points, and Australian brand equivalence groups. I reflected on how formulation and brand changes should be explained and monitored in pharmacy practice. Next episode, we move to the other major stimulant family, amphetamine-based ADHD medicines, including dexamphetamine and lisdexamphetamine, and why Vyvanse is more than simply a slow-release dexamphetamine. I'll see you next time we get on the Pop Pod. Bye. Also, apparently I've been saying Concerta, and a few people have pointed out that it's actually Concerta because, and I quote, there is no sh in Concerta, which is fair, but here's how my brain got there, right? We've got the word concert, and then we have the word concerto, where the C becomes more of a ch sound. And apparently somewhere over the 25 years in pharmacy, my brain has decided that Concerta belongs in the concerto family. So the manufacturer pronounces it Concerta, so that's the official and the safest choice. But if you hear a pharmacist say Concerta, they're probably not inventing a new medication. They're just adding a tiny Italian flourish to the dispensary. Either way, the tablet remains completely unbothered.